En esta presentación vamos a repasar conceptos gramaticales de nivel 2. Vas a necesitar unos materiales como tu manila folder, un bolígrafo y es probable que necesites marcadores. Los objetivos de esta presentación son repasar los pronombres indirectos, directos y reflexivos, los verbos que requieren objetivos indirectos como el verbo gustar y las construcciones con verbos infinitivos. Vamos a repasar lo que aprendiste sobre los pronombres. El año pasado repasaste los indirect object pronouns. Aquí los tienes. Mete, le, nos, vos, les, and then you have also the meaning to each one. You also reviewed the direct object pronouns. The direct object pronouns replaces the direct object in a sentence and it answers the question who or what. Where the indirect object pronoun, it answers the question to whom or for whom the action of the verb is performed. You have them listed there to the left and the meaning to the right. Now, if you were to use these in a sentence, I have this for an example. De pequeña yo sabía que mi abuela siempre tenía dulces. As a little girl, I always knew my grandma had candy. Dulces is a direct object. If I was to continue on with that idea, los escondía al fondo de su bolsa. She hid them at the bottom of her purse. Los agrees with dulces, singular, masculine. Another example is, nuestros padres compraban rompecabezas cada vez que iban a una venta de garaje, pero yo los escondía. The direct object, what our parents used to buy, were puzzles, and each time they went to a garage sale, they bought some. But I hid them. Los would replace rompecabezas. Note how in both sentences you must mention your direct object first. Los escondía, los dulces. I cannot write a sentence just expressing grandma hid them without clarifying or stating what them is. Other examples. Cuando mi abuela venía a nuestra casa, siempre me traía dulces. Ella me los daba en secreto antes de que Beto, mi hermano, los viera. In this sentence, Grandma used to, same sentence, but I said that she brought me candy each time she came to the house. She brought them especially for me, so me traía dulces. Now I also replace los dulces in the second sentence with los. So the sentence reads, ella me los daba en secreto. She gave them to me. Another example where both direct and indirect object pronouns are being used is in this sentence. Cuando mi padre me pedía los rompecabezas, yo se los daba rápidamente. So when my father asked for the puzzles, I would give them to him quickly because I was an obedient child. Se los daba. Note how le is replaced here with se, and I'll explain this on the next slide. The pronoun placement, when you're working with either one pronoun or two, the rule is the same. It always goes before the main verb of a sentence. However, if you have two verbs in a sentence, then you have options. Option 1 would be to attach it to the infinitive. Option 2 is just simply before the main verb. When two pronouns are attached to an infinitive, you must add an mark before the R of the infinitive. So it would be either an A, an E, or an I. Also, in your present progressives, you could, in your present progressive constructions, you can place it before estar or attached to the participle. Yo le estoy enseñando or yo estoy enseñándoles, for example. Now this concept we're going to be learning in a few weeks, compound tenses. In compound tenses, there are no exceptions. They always have to be before haber. So remember this, and we'll talk about these later. So as I said and mentioned earlier, remember that any time le or les is followed by a direct object pronoun, lo, la or las, le and les becomes se. Now this is the sentence structure. There are two. According to the previous slide, you would write the subject, IOP comes before DOP, and then a verb. That is when one verb is in a sentence. But if you have two verbs, you could either write it the main verb, the infinitive, and then you attach the IOP and the DOP. And remember that the accent mark is required. I have a couple of examples here. Fernando te da los triciclos. He gives them to you. Te is to you. Now I replace los triciclos and it would be Fernando te los da. Now, a different sentence where I have attached the pronouns to the infinitive, it would look like this. Mi abuela quería comprármela. Note how an accent mark has been added to the A before in the infinitive. The reflexive verbs. You spent an entire unit on this last year. A reflexive verb is it's when the subject and the object are the same. A person does as well as receives the action. And the subject, the pronoun, and the verb are all in the same form. So these are the reflexive pronouns, and here you have what each of them mean. The pronoun placement is the same as the previously mentioned. Here I have some examples with reflexives pronouns as far as placement. It either goes in front of the conjugated verb, which is the main verb in the sentence. Here are three examples. Me acuesto, me quiero acostar, me estoy acostando. Or you could attach it to what we call the gerundo. This is the present progressive. You also saw this last year. Estoy acostándome. Luisa está cepillándose. Note how there's an accent mark in the gerundo, which would be the A, or could be the E, or the I, before the pronoun. Or it could also be attached to the infinitive. Voy a cepillarme los dientes. Now, if I was to replace los dientes, voy a cepillármelos. Note how there's that acento there too. Now, this is just a review again from last year. It would be an expectation that you use the reflexive verbs accordingly, and especially the pronoun placement as well as the accent marks. Now here's a list of reflexive verbs. Most of the reflexive verbs and those that you learned actually last year are your daily routine. Anything related to your daily routine. Are those the only reflexive verbs? No. There are over 50 verbos, but at least these would be some that you may want to use in the upcoming chapters, and more will be added to the Manila folder as we move forward. Now we have the verbo gustar. The verbo gustar is used as a primary verb to go over the rules that a list of verbs use the same grammatical rule. So in English, the verbo gustar is translated to, or it's used in Spanish as, it's pleasing to me. In English, you say, I like Spanish, whereas in Spanish, what we're really saying, it's to me, Spanish is pleasing. So the word order is actually backwards to English. The indirect object comes first, which is me, if I use this sentence. Then the verb, which is gusta. And finally, the subject, of the verb, which is in this case el español. So the sentence would read, me gusta el español. Here are the indirect object pronouns again. And what you have to the right and to the left are the phrases that we use for clarification or for emphasis in a sentence. To say, a mí me gusta el español, o a ti te gusta. Note how yo and tú is not used with these verbs. We use the pronoun me and ti. Also note the acento over me. So a few examples of using the verbo gustar would be, a los niños les gustaba ir al parque. Les agrees with los niños, it was pleasing to them, whereas gustaba is singular because it's followed by an infinitive. De niña no me molestaban los perros. The perros didn't bother me. They weren't bothersome to me. Me being la niña. What didn't bother me were los perros. So the verb agrees with los perros. You'll see here in the sentence structure, especially under the column under verbos, that whether a verb is AR, ER, or IR, you're only going to use the third person singular and the third person plural, because the verb will agree with the direct object, with the noun, just like you saw in the previous slide. Now, this is exactly the structure of a sentence. If you were to use it, you would take basically a word from each of the columns to write a correct sentence. Now here's a list of verbos like gustar. These verbos follow the same rule. You need an IOP. It could only be conjugated in third person singular and plural. If you need emphasis or clarification in a sentence, you do not use yo, you do not use tú. You use a mí me duele, a ti te interesan los deportes, for example. We will be adding these to the Manila folder. And the infinitive constructions, you learned some of these last year. The last three you learned with the reflexive verbs. Antes de ducharme, me acuesto. Después de, en acabar de. Others have been introduced to you at level 1. And para, por, and sin, these are level 3. And we will be using this throughout the year, especially when we get with the compounds and other concepts. Para and por both mean for, and I'll explain in class when we get to that lesson the difference between the two, or the rules for each one. Sin means without. Sin pensar, dije tonterías. Without thinking, I said, silly stuff. So this is just a quick review of level 2 concepts that you will expected to practice, that I will be using in class. And when I grade your writing, this would be things that I would be looking at, and that I would hope, that I know that you'll be improving as the year goes on. The last slide is your Manila folder. Here are the notes that you need to include to your Manila folder. I realize it might be a bit small. I might add just the image to links and files. So if this doesn't work for you, look under that file. Hope this review is helpful.